What's up, Met fans? Welcome back to Talking Mets and Rob. How is everybody doing on this Monday? MLB Free Agent Frenzy edition. Hopefully everybody is doing well on this Monday, and if you are a fan of soccer or interested in the World Cup, if you just finished watching the USA versus Wales, tied. Unfortunately, soccer is that way. And a grand total of 4 shots on goal. That must have been fun for everybody to. And yet people say baseball is boring. Oh boy. All right, guys. So sorry, I just had to get that out for a second since it was a busy day, but the only time I ever get into soccer is the World Cup because it's always interesting, I guess. But yes, so we are here the week of Thanksgiving. It's been a couple of weeks since about 3 weeks since the World Series has been over. Can something happen that can actually get a fan base excited? As I said in my last live stream, I believe Senga is going to sign this week. There is no doubt that I believe that he's going to sign. He's going to sign very soon. And it just feels that way. There was other teams that were getting involved in Senga. Again, we still heard that the Mets made an offer to Senga. I don't know if other teams have. I've been trying to follow other beat reporters for the Padres, the Cubs, and a couple of other teams that showed interest. I haven't heard one word about another team giving an offer. All I heard was the Japanese reporter that has been following Senga around the United States said in Japanese that the Mets offered him a contract, gave him a contract offer. And that's the last we heard of it. So I don't know what else has been said besides the fact that I believe Senga is going around. Again, these Japanese pitchers want to sign as quickly as possible. Number one, they have a certain amount of time to sign because if they don't sign within a certain amount of time, they got to go back to Japan. There's only a certain time period that international free agents have to sign with a Major League Baseball team. So with that said, we'll see what happens with that. But we did hear that Justin Verlander and our New York Mets had a Zoom meeting, and nobody really knows where it went. I'm assuming that it was probably okay. Again, Verlander knows the Mets are in a situation where he's probably going to be plan B. I know that don't sound right. No, not the contraceptive. Plan B for the Mets plans. And that's something that the Mets have to look at. If you just tuned into the live stream and you haven't checked out the Verlander to Mets video I just posted about a half hour ago, please check that out when you get a chance. I go into detail exactly why Verlander is a major option for the Mets, because the Mets, look, the pitching market is one thing. When you look at the pitching market and what it's going to happen when it comes to the tier of free agents available, it's Degrom at the top. Then you can put Verlander behind him. Then you can put Rodon, and then it trickles down from there. These other pitchers are not, especially, I don't think Justin Verlander is going to sign until Jacob Degrom signs. One, it's because of the fact that now Verlander has Scherzer's contract and Degrom's contract, which everybody assumes is going to be more than Max Scherzer's contract per AAV. That's something that we have to look at. So it can be possible that the fact that, like I said this in the video, again, I go into detail a little bit more if you want to go check it out. I say, obviously, if you really want to go nuts and Cohen doesn't care, sign DeGrom, sign Verlander, and then, you technically, in quotes, have 3 aces on the staff, and then you can do whatever the hell you want with the 4th and 5th starter. The 4th starter will probably be Carrasco. If you want to sign Senga and make me a 5th starter, if he turns out to be as good as expected, well, now you got a really good rotation. But again, somebody in the video premiere a few minutes ago said, does 3 aces get you over the hump in October? I don't know. I probably not, because when it came down to it, the Braves, the Dodgers, and the Mets all got ousted in the first round or earlier. So besides the Astros, they were basically the only team that were favored to be in the top 4 or at least to go into the World Series, made it. Everybody else got out way too early than anybody expected. So you can't just look at, everybody talked about this year. Oh, nobody wants to face the Mets in a short series because of Degrom and Scherzer. Well, how did that work out with the Padres? It comes down to this. Put the best team you possibly can to make the playoffs. Not just win the division. Of course, everybody wants to win the division. But I think the problem, and this includes myself, I'm not ousting anybody, but a lot of Mets fans, and I assume the Mets players, got so dead focused on the division that mentally they were completely shot along with the Mets fans after they lost those 3 games against the Braves. It acted like nothing else mattered. Like the Padres always had a weird, odd, eerie feeling to it in the wild card series. Even, I went to game 2 and 3 in the Padres series. Even game 1, it just seemed a little off. The fan base and the Mets players, something was off about that team. And you could say it was the getting beat down by the Braves to lose the division. True, but that doesn't mean that the Mets win the division and then the Phillies face the Mets instead of the Braves. And who says the Mets were going to beat the Phillies? The Phillies were on a roll in the playoffs. The Mets could have lost to the Phillies. So when it comes down to everything you have to look at in perspective, put the best team together to make the playoffs. It doesn't matter if you're the 6th seed or the number 1 seed. Get into the playoffs. Again, as I said, the New York Mets and everybody else, this baseball setup and the way the seedings are now, that there's 6 teams in the playoffs that get into the playoffs, it's like the NHL playoffs now. The 8th seed can win the Stanley Cup, just like the 6th seed in Major League Baseball could win the World Series. It's just the way it is now. Again, you can not like it all you want. You can be pissed off about it. Again, people kept on complaining every game in the playoffs when the Phillies started to win more games in the playoffs and get further and further. Oh, they shouldn't have been in the playoffs. They shouldn't have been in the playoffs. Well, guess what? They were. Because if you're a fan base that had a team that was the 6th seed and doing what the Phillies did in this playoffs, everybody would be excited. And then the other fan bases would say, oh, you shouldn't have been in the playoffs anyway. So it comes down to the fact, do what you got to do to make the playoffs. Make your team better to make the playoffs. That's it. It's very simple. Can it come down to starting pitching? Sure, if the series calls for it. But let's be honest. Were the Phillies shutting everybody down in the playoffs? No, they were giving up runs. It wasn't like Wheeler was lights out every game he started. Nola was good one game, bad another. It came down to what did the Phillies do in that game. They scored a ton of runs in the playoffs. That's where the Mets completely fell apart during the second half of the season, and it showed in the playoffs. They would have 10 runs in one game in the series, say against, I don't know, Oakland, and they wouldn't score, or any other series you think of. They can score 10 runs in the first game, and then the next two games of the series, they'll score 2 runs. It comes down to the fact that nobody can say offense is the way to win a World Series. Nobody can say pitching is the way to win the World Series, because everything factors into it, right? I thought the Phillies were a bad matchup for the Braves, right? Nobody thought the Padres were going to beat the Dodgers because the way they took care of them in the regular season. But guess what? The Dodgers couldn't score. You know, they had the best scoring team in baseball. They couldn't score against the Padres. The Phillies, right? They were terrible in the first half of the year, right? They figured out their defense a little bit. Their bullpen got a little bit better. And look what happened. They started scoring more runs. Harper got healthy, or at least healthy enough, got back in the lineup and helped that lineup going forward. So it just is what it is. And you can't be mad at the fact that, you know, some people are going to be mad what the Mets do. Some people are going to be happy what the Mets do. But the big thing is this. Do what you think can help this team going forward. That's all you can do. That's it. You know, clutch hitting always matters. You know what? I mean, look at the people. Look who the Padres. Everybody talked about um Machado and guys like that and Soto, but yet Trent Grisham had huge home runs against the Mets and huge home runs against the Dodgers and huge RBIs against the Mets and the Dodgers. You can't predict that. You know, nobody predicted that Daniel Murphy can hit 6 home runs in the playoffs. You can't predict that. Did anybody think going into game 1 of the NLDS against the Dodgers in 2015 that Daniel Murphy was going to be the star of the postseason? No. You can't predict that type of stuff. So, if you can't predict it, how can you just say, well, this is the reason why the Mets lost? Yeah, you can look at, the lineup was the problem. Well, Christian, yeah, okay, but again, I mean, it seemed that way because the Padres were on a hot run after they beat the Mets, and everything seemed like the Padres were just going all in on the Dodgers. I didn't think the Padres were going to beat them, but I did think the Phillies were going to beat the Braves because the Phillies gave a hard time to the Braves the entire season, and the Phillies matched up well against the Braves, and that was something that we talked about a couple of times. Even during the after the Mets lost against the Padres, that we talked about it. The Phillies just felt they were just the perfect team to beat the Braves. Just not that they were better than the Braves, because remember, Brave fans all season kept on saying the Braves were better than the Mets, right? You know, they kept on saying the lineup, the names, and all that. Well, look at the names and the lineups against the Phillies and the Braves, right? It should be no contest. But guess what? The Phillies just matched up well against the Braves, and that's all you need is good matchups, and all you need is to get hot at the right time. The Phillies did, right? You know, there was Philly fans that were saying, "Oh, we knew this team was better than the Phillies, the Mets, and the Braves." Come on, that's not true. All right, just because they got further in the playoffs doesn't mean you were the better team. You just got hot at the right time, and you beat the teams in a series. That's it. For 162 games, the Phillies were the third best team in the division. But once again, it does not matter anymore, right? Maybe 10, 15 years ago, being the best teams in the league meant that you had a pretty good chance of making the World Series because that's the way baseball was. Usually the better teams usually always made it. But what's the fun in that? Seriously, like I know people think that this setup, this format sucks. But again, you know what? We had a really good season this year, the Mets, with 101 wins. And, people were like, oh, you can't trade out prospects during the deadline. You can't just mess up our future. Great. There is no guarantee year after year you're going to win anywhere from 101 wins. Again, you could have 94 wins, but there's no guarantee you're going to have 101 wins. And the majority of those wins came when Jacob Degrom wasn't pitching for the Mets and Scherzer was out with the oblique. So it comes down to the fact, just make the playoffs. Do what you got to do to make the playoffs. And I think that's the most important thing. I think we lost as fans focus to, because we were down in the dumps. I was with you guys. I was down in the dumps too. We needed one game against Atlanta and we would have won the division. But we took so much solace into the division that nothing felt right at all going into the Padres series for the wildcard series. Even though we are on paper, we were the better team. We should have won that series. But it seemed like the players and the fans were just down in the dumps feeling sorry for themselves and never got out of that shithole that the Braves put us in. And that's the problem when it comes to worrying about a division that, in perspective, meant absolutely nothing going into the playoffs, right? I don't know why people haven't been paying attention to this, but over the last 5, 6, 7 years, when was the last time two teams that were the best in baseball faced each other in the World Series? Right? 2019, it was the Astros and the Nationals, right? 2020, in the pandemic year, Rays, Dodgers. Last year, Astros, Braves. This year, Astros, Phillies. Besides the Astros and, okay, the Dodgers, who was really that great? Even the Braves last year weren't a great team, right? They had nobody in the division that can contest them at all in 2021, right? The Mets fell apart in early August. They had 2 months of not worrying about the division. The Braves won 87 games. It's not like they won the division winning 99 games, right? They were an average team that got hot at the right time, just like the Nationals did in 2019, just like the Phillies did this year. They just didn't get over the hump, right? And that's the way the playoffs have going right now. Yeah, Rocky, exactly. Over 315 wins between 3 teams lost in the first round or earlier. That shouldn't happen, but that's why you play the game. If you're going to worry about seedings and formats, I mean, just enjoy the game of baseball. The shift is gone. That's going to be different. That's something that we talked about all year. Again, the amount of times the Mets shifted in the infield with runners on base used to drive me up a wall. I never understood shifting in the infield with runners on base. How many times did you see it where there's a lefty at the plate, guy on first base, 1 out, double play can end the inning. They shift everybody to the right side, so there's nobody on the left side. The guy hits a ground ball right where the shortstop should be. It would be an ending double play, and it ends up being either a base hit or the shortstop or the third baseman that was playing up the middle by second base, because they have to have everybody on the right side, gets to the ball late and both runners are safe. Like, it makes no sense to me. So the game with the no shifts is going to be a lot different, right? There's going to be a lot left-handers that hit line drives to right field where should be base hits, and usually the shift is the guy right there. Might get things rolling a little bit offensively, but we'll see what happens with that. But everything's beside the point when it comes to the New York Mets. Do we think it's all, like we all talked about it? Oh, the Mets pitching. Nobody's going to be able to beat them in the playoffs because a short series, those pitchers, they got 1 through 4 that even Carrasco could be a number 3 at worst on most teams. Bassett could be a number 2 on most teams. And it didn't get the Mets out of the wild card round. And again, it's not like the Phillies were world beaters when it came to their pitchers. So it's hard for GMs, it's hard for owners to figure out what type of team to put together to make sure they get back to the playoffs and don't have the same mistakes that cost them games in the playoffs, that cost them a chance to go further in the playoffs. That's something that all GMs have to figure out. And it's okay to not get every big free agent. Again, the Mets didn't get a lot of big free agents last year, right? They got the best at the time center fielder on the market in Marte, and they got Max Scherzer. They didn't, and they traded for Chris Bassett, but they didn't make huge signings. But they also didn't do enough, I think, at the trade deadline. I'm sorry. When you have the oldest team in baseball in 2022, and you're not going to use the assets you have in prospects, again, prospects, remember, it's prospects, all right, to not better your team, that everybody, that the whole year this team is in the top 3 or 4 in record-wise and best teams in baseball, and you're not going to do enough to get over that hump or make them better. I said this in 2019 as well, when the Mets basically got nobody at the deadline. Not especially, they got Stroman, everything like that, but they didn't do that extra mile when they started to play really well, and they didn't really do enough. And I think the same thing in 2021 and even last year. When you're GM, when you're the player and you're in first place the entire year, you're playing well, you just need that one extra something. If it's a bat, at the time it was the Mets with the bat. Just needed that one extra bat that can make a difference to spark the lineup, like Cespedes did in 2015. when you're a player on that team and then the deadline is over and the Mets get a reliever, Ruff and Vogelback and Naquin, that kind of sets you back a little bit and like, damn, our front office doesn't think we're that good, that we're not good enough to go all in. I can assure you there was players on that team that thought that. And I think that's a huge problem. And I think that's where Billy Epler failed. And I'm not saying, it wasn't the Mets bullpen that caused them to lose in the playoffs. It was the Mets offense. And we talked about this the entire year. There was no protection behind Pete Alonso. There was not enough home runs in this lineup that can help out Pete Alonso in situations where not a lot of times you're going to have 3 or 4 hitters hot at the same time that are doubles and singles hitters that are not big home run guys. I said it was going to be a big problem, and we talked about this for months during the season. They were scoring runs a lot in the first half. But when it came down to it, how many times where you'll have 2 guys hot, but then the rest of the lineup cold, they would get on base and nobody can drive them in. You know what? Even guys that are not hot and are going through a cold spell connect on one with a home run. And that's something that the Mets were lacking other than Pete Alonso. Every time when Pete Alonso come up, it felt like he had to hit a home run with guys in scoring on base so we can actually get some more runs than trying to knock in 5 or 6 hits together to score 3 runs. Because that's fun and it's small ball and it works. And it worked for the first half. But when it came down to it, shit, we needed extra power in the bat. And Vogelback and Ruff, you can't bring in a 220 hitter that only hits against one pitcher and expect them to hit and give that protection that you needed for Pete Alonso. Again, Vogelback is a 16, 17 home run guy, just like Ruff is 13, 14 home run guy. Those are not power bats. And that's what annoyed me about the deadline with Epler, was the fact that they talked about Vogelback crushes righties, Ruff crushes lefties. Yeah, but they're 220, 215, 220 hitters that if they don't hit a home run, they're useless in every aspect of the game. Vogelback, great, he gets a single, great. Now he's a freaking doormat on the base paths who can't move. Ruff is not athletic. He couldn't put the bat on the ball at all. So it was useless the whole time when it came to those 2 guys, and they came up with the whole analytical bullshit to explain why they made those moves. And analytically, they went with the Platoon at DH, which is an absolute disaster. Name me an American League team over the last 10 to 15 years that used the Platoon at DH. Epler should know better. He was with the Yankees under Cashman for all those years. He was a GM of an American League team in the Angels. He should know better. You do not platoon with 2 guys at DH. It doesn't work. Because what I was telling you throughout the entire season, and then when we got Vogelback and Ruff, when one of those guys are hot and you get pitchers a couple of times in a row that might be right-handed and all left-handed, and the guy that was hot has to sit on the bench because he can't pitch, he can't hit those pitchers from whatever side they throw on, what's the point of having that guy hot if you can't play him every day? We had that exact situation in Oakland. We were in Milwaukee. Vogelback hit almost 300, had a couple of home runs, a couple of RBIs. He was hot. He had to sit down the next series against Oakland because the A's pitched 3 lefties in a row, and guess who got the starts in those games? Darren Ruff. You can't have a platoon. Give me a guy that bats 270 and hits 17 to 20 home runs. I trust that guy who hits 270, who can hit righties and lefties for about the same average and gives me enough power where he can be a threat in the lineup. It was just the stupidest mindset where analytics is such bullshit when it comes to what the Mets are trying to spill us and make us believe with Ruff and Vogelback, when no matter how good somebody was in that situation, if they're hot, but there's a pitcher on the mound that they're not good against, they will not play. How does that make sense? It doesn't, right? If Vogelback was hot against if Vogelback had a good game in game 1 in the Padres against who was pitching? Darvish. He hit a home run, had 2 RBIs, and was 2 for 3. Right? Pretty good, right? Wouldn't you want him starting the next game? Nope. Can't have that. Blake Snell's on the mound. He's a lefty, so Darren Ruff has to play. You see the problem with that? That doesn't work. That makes no sense. And because the nerds in the back room says, oh, look, Darren Ruff crushes lefties because of this stat. And then you take out Vogelback, who had a good night the night before, and put Ruff in. First off, how can you get any momentum? How can you get any rhythm? And then Ruff is garbage, strikes out, 2 times, and then hits a ground ball in the game against Snell, even though the Mets won that game. The next night, Vogelback's in there again because Joe Musgrove is pitching. Well, now you sat down the guy who had a really good game 1, can't play game 2. Now he's coming back in game 3 cold and doesn't have a rhythm anymore. How does that make sense? It doesn't. And Rocky, yes, Judge would solve that, but I'm thinking logical here. I don't think the Mets have to do crazy things, right? They're losing one position player, possibly, and that's Nimmo. And again, if it comes to a lot of people are thinking, look, there's a lot of teams involved in Brandon Nimmo, the Rockies, still the Mariners, the Blue Jays, the Giants just was said to be having a conversation with Brandon Nimmo's agent, Scott Boras. So, whoever is really aggressive against Judge to get Judge and doesn't get him is going to be very interested in Brandon Nimmo. So if the Giants lose out on a Judge, and Judge goes to whatever team, if it's the Yankees again, the Giants are going to be all over Brandon Nimmo. That's the reason why Brandon Nimmo is not going to sign yet, right? Jacob Degrom not signing does have nothing to do with Brandon Nimmo. Aaron Judge and Brandon Nimmo obviously are in different tiers. Judge is here and Nimmo's here, but Judge's contract has nothing to do with Nimmo's contract. But Judge, wherever Judge signs is where they need a right fielder or possibly center fielder. So those teams who lose out on Judge is obviously going to pivot to Brandon Nimmo. That's why Brandon Nimmo was not going to sign before Aaron Judge. Because why would Nimmo sign early when he can lose out on probably a $10 to $15 million more for the team that lost out on Judge and now is desperate for an outfielder? And now Nimmo can benefit from that team or a couple of teams lose out on Aaron Judge. The same thing goes for Jacob Degrom, right? There is, Tyler Anderson was like tier 3 when it came to the starting pitching market, right? You put Degrom and Verlander at top, then Rodon, and you could put Senga, I guess, depending on what you think of them, and then it goes down from there, right? So until Degrom signs, that's why Verlander is not going to sign before Degrom, because Verlander wants to see what Degrom's going to get. He's like, oh, look, he got more than Scherzer. Say Degrom gets $45 million. He gets about $1.5 million more than Max Scherzer. Verlander, who won the Cy Young, pitched better than Max Scherzer. If everybody thinks that Degrom is the best pitcher in baseball healthy, well, Verlander is going to want in between. So he wants $44 million. So he'll get a little bit more than Max Scherzer, but a little less than Jacob Degrom. That's how that works. That's when people are talking about just AAV. AAV has nothing to do with Jacob Degrom and Aaron Judge. The two best players, free agent players on the market, have nothing to do with each other in AAV, right? Because Judge can get $46 million or $43 million, but he'll be the most position player-wise, but has nothing to do with the pitchers. And that's when it comes down to the fact that what will the Mets do, right? If they sign Jacob Degrom, I'm pretty certain they're going to sign either Rodon or Senga. And then you'll have Scherzer, Degrom, and one of those other two pitchers with Carrasco and whoever else you want to be the fifth starter. Tim, Nimmo's main bonus is he's a lefty. He's a hodgepodge of skills that are good, but overall half baked, especially at his age. Well, Tim, I understand why people like Nimmo, but Nimmo is nowhere worth $150 million. And he's projected to get that now. He's projected to get between 125 and 150. I'm sorry, guys. Nimmo's good, but if you break down all his stats, not just the ones everybody likes to pick out, say, look, he's really good at that. Well, what about the bad things he does? Right? Nimmo wasn't a great center fielder, still isn't a great center fielder. He's a good center fielder, but realize what made him good, right? He used to play normal depth 2 years ago, right? 2021, pretty good, right? Normal depth. In the second half of 2021, the Mets realized, hey, let's play Nimmo a little deeper because he has a hard time going back on balls, and he's pretty good on coming in on balls. So what does that do for a center fielder who has no arm? Number one, anytime a player's on first or a player's on second, a guy on first trying to go first or third on a base hit up the middle, a guy who's on second, and this is not speed runners on the base path either. Guy on second, base hit up the middle, Nimmo has no chance of throwing these guys out at third or at home because he plays so deep, and with no arm at all, there's no chance of him throwing those players out and those runners out. And that's the big problem with Nimmo defensively. Offensively, when Nimmo's on, he'll give you a 10-pitch at bat to start the game. He'll watch a lot of pitchers. He'll foul a lot of pitches off. He'll take his walks. Great on base percentage. Great. But let's not act like all those things that he does offensively, just what I just said, translates into a 300 average, because he's 260, 270 at best for a leadoff hitter. We have a leadoff hitter on this team, right? People complained all season, especially Met fans, about Jeff McNeil being so low in the lineup. Don't you think you would want a 300 plus hitter as a leadoff man who does similar things than Nimmo? McNeil is that guy, right? So losing Nimmo is not the end of the world. You got Jeff McNeil that can go right into that leadoff spot, who, let's be honest, I'd rather have a 300 hitter in the leadoff spot than a 260 hitter. And another thing with Brandon Nimmo, Marte got hit by the pitch in Pittsburgh, was out the whole month of September. Brandon Nimmo needed to be that spark plug. We needed Brandon Nimmo to pick it up in September without Marte. Nimmo had one of his worst months in 2022 in the month of September. You know why? Because there was more pressure put on him. There was more reasons for Nimmo to be a big part of this lineup, and he struggled. He struck out more in September than any other month. He took less walks. He wasn't taking a lot of pitches. And that same Brandon Nimmo that everybody loves was non-existent in September. He had a couple of good games here and there in September, but for the most part, he hit 240 in September, right? 20 points below his season average, and one of the lowest in September. You cannot have that inconsistency, and you can't give a guy $150 million that you can't trust to say, here, we need you, take advantage, take this situation and grab it by the balls. They didn't do that. He didn't do that. That's a problem. Not only does he has discrepancies defensively with his arm, and because Nimmo is not good going back on balls, when you play deeper, you're going to get to balls that are just going over the wall, or that are hit hard going to deep center, or going right center or left center into the gaps. You're playing deep. You don't need a great jump on the ball because you're basically there. You don't have to run back on balls. Nimmo's a great side-to-side and coming in player. when it comes defensively. Going back, he's terrible. That's why he plays so deep. They talked about it on the broadcast over and over again. Guys, on a hard line drive base hit to center field, yeah, sometimes a quick runner can go first to third with no throw. But when you got average runners going first to third without a throw, that's a problem. And that's the issue that I have. Delmar, no, it's not about concrete shoots for Nimmo. It's just that Nimmo is a corner outfielder by trade. He was drafted to be a corner outfielder, right? He was drafted as a center fielder. The Mets thought of him as a corner outfielder when they got to see him a little bit more in the minors. They moved him to corner outfielders, right? Even when Nimmo was here, Michael Conforto played center field, and Nimmo was playing right because they didn't think Nimmo was a great center fielder. The Mets didn't have a choice for a couple of years with Nimmo because they were trying to keep Michael Conforto healthy, so they left him in right field. So Nimmo was the de facto center fielder. But everybody thought when they signed Marte, there goes your center fielder. That's why everybody thought they signed Marte. But because Nimmo had a quote-unquote good defensive analytical year, everybody just was like, okay, center field for Nimmo. And Buck said the best arm on the team in the outfield should play right field, which is true. Again, Nimmo, if you look at the analytics, shows that he's a really good center fielder. But look what had to happen for him to become a better center fielder. And it was because analytics showed that he's bad going back on balls. So why not play deep? Why do you think how many times when you're watching it on TV and you hear the ball gets hit hard to center field and it seems like Nimmo never has to move? Well, because he's playing so far deep. That's the reason why. And again, would I be mad? Look, it's not my money. If Steve Cohen says, I want Brandon Nimmo, don't matter what it costs, what would I say? Okay, good. Because I like Brandon Nimmo as an all-around player. But when there's a guy out there that I believe is better and is worth the money, I do that. And Trey Turner is that guy. I've said that from the beginning. I think Trey Turner is one of the most important pieces to the Mets offseason. Obviously, besides what they do with the starters that they have to sign. And that's why I'm thinking Trey Turner is really important because I think Trey Turner and a lot of people around baseball think Trey Turner can play center field. Again, I've heard things that, Trey Turner doesn't want to play second, doesn't want to play center field. Money talks, okay? Right? The same thing where Marte thought he was signing with the Mets to play center field, and Buck was like, no, you're playing right field. Marte took the most money, right? The Mets gave him well over market value to sign Marte because they wanted Marte. Same thing goes for Trey Turner. If the Mets want Trey Turner and they got to spend a little bit more to keep Trey Turner to go to the Phillies, he'll do that. And Trey Turner will play center field if we need him to. It's what would happen, and with Trey Turner's speed and his athletic ability, there's no reason why he can't play center field because everybody thinks he can. And we'll see. Again, it might be a disaster. I don't know. But I can't look at Trey Turner and Brandon Nimmo and say, I'd rather have Brandon Nimmo. That makes no sense to me. And you know what? If Trey Turner can't play center field, then Marte can play center field, and you can put McNeil in left or McNeil in right, and leave Canner in left field. I'll do that too. So there's options with the Mets. It's just that I don't see why you have to pay Brandon Nimmo $150 million to stay with them. Like I said, does everybody want the same team back? Because that's the way it sounds like with a lot of people that I comment on my channel throughout the videos for the last month or so, saying, we got to sign Brandon Nimmo and Jacob Degrom. So you want the exact same team back that won 101 games but failed in the playoffs. Because why do you want the same team back and expect different results? This is the same laughable conversation we've had with the Yankees for the last couple of years, right? How we joked about that. How Yankee fans are delusional in the first half when they were playing so well, when most of these guys' career numbers show that they were playing well above the back of their baseball card. So if the Yankees, and we talked about this across the year, if the Yankees continue to bring back the same team and expect different results, but don't get different results, why would anybody be shocked by that? And that's the same thing with the Mets. You know, there's not a lot of guys that had career years with the Mets. I mean, yeah, you could say Canna had a decent year. Nimmo played the best of his career, but it was the first time he played this many games in his career, and it was a contract year. So that's something we have to look at as well. So what do you do? Do you want to bring back the same team? Because if the way people are talking, like even people that were commenting about my predictions, oh, you put 5 out of the top 20 free agents going to the Mets. Well, the Mets have 7 free agents from their own team, mostly starters, mostly relievers, and the big one, Nimmo, at center field. So does people assume that the Mets are just going to make all the trades to get these guys or get players on their team? No. The logical thing to do when you have 7 free agents from your own team is to sign players to either bring them back or replace them. That's how it goes. That's why when people laughed at it, it's like, wait a second. So the Mets had 4 free agent starting pitchers in Degrom, Bassett, Carrasco, and Walker. They brought back $14 million for Carrasco. Okay, so that's 1 free agent they got back. So what are you supposed to do, right? You can't just make 5 trades, and to get better, if you're going to get better in trades, you're going to have to give up prospects that Epler seems like he doesn't want to do. So how else the Mets are going to get players to fill those spots? Free agency. That's why it's not a long shot to think that the Mets can make 3, 4, 5 signings in free agency that involves 5 out of the top 20 free agents. And again, if you bring back Nimmo, if you bring back Degrom, does that make the Mets better or the same team that probably played better than about 99% of the fans and baseball and people in baseball thought the Mets played? So if people thought the Mets were going to win 94 games, they played 7 games better than people expected with the team that they had last year. So if you bring back almost the same team, say if you bring back DeGrom and Nimmo, okay, but you still lost Bassett, who was the most consistent pitcher on your team. You still have Walker, who had a really good first half and a decent second half. And that is going to translate to another 101 win season? No, because there has to be more, because you didn't win the World Series, so your team wasn't good enough. Like, if the Astros won the World Series, if the Astros say, let's bring back Verlander and go back with the same team, the fan base should be fine because they won the World Series with that team. But if you're a team that didn't win the World Series, why bring back the same team when you failed? That makes no sense to me. And the Mets shouldn't do that. The Yankees shouldn't do that. The Dodgers, the Braves, the Phillies, who made the World Series, shouldn't bring back the same team. Why do you think the Phillies are talking about Trey Turner? Because what did they lack the last 3 games of that series? Offense. Right? That's the difference there. And if you're going to bring back the same team, do not, and I tell this to people all the time that want to bring back DeGrom and Nimmo, and, oh, we should still bring back Bassett. Okay, so you bring back DeGrom, you bring back Bassett, you bring back Nimmo. So you got nearly almost your rotation back. You bring back Nimmo with the majority of the same people in the lineup. What results do you expect more of? Because in all likelihood, somebody's going to have a worse year than last year. So that trickled down to the fact that, oh, well, maybe that guy who had a career year, like, oh, let me guess, Brandon Nimmo, is he going to have a better year than he had last year? Or is he going to go back to the Brandon Nimmo of his entire Mets career and have nagging injuries and be injured and not play 145 to 150 games? It's something you have to think about. You can't just go on last year's performance and say, oh, he's going to replicate that. You don't know that. And again, Nimmo never done this in his career. All of a sudden, this contract year, the nagging injuries went away. Career year. Well, it's easy to have a career year when you play 150 games. And the only time in your career you played close to that was the second year of your career. So, in every other year, you played less than 100 games. So, it's kind of hard not to have a career year when you never played more than 100 games except for once until last year. So, you got to think of it more logically then. You have to go outside the box, look at it from a wider angle, and look at the fact that you bring back the same team, different results are probably not going to happen. Now, you can say, and I can agree with you with this argument, well, Degrom didn't pitch in the first half. Scherzer missed almost 8 weeks in total with the oblique. You put those two guys together and you add a couple of weeks of them pitching every fifth day, you might have had a couple of more wins here and there. But it's guys like Canna who played really well for the Mets and basically had a career year. Marte played really well, around his same stats. Nimmo, career year, right? Pete Alonso, best year of his career minus 2019, right? Lindor, best year as a Met. Last year, 2021, terrible. Escobar, everybody could say, well, Escobar could be better. Well, I don't know if he can be worse, but if he's a little bit better, all right, fine. Can McNeil replicate his batting title? If McCann hits a little bit, maybe we would be better. But there's a lot of ifs there too, right? The bullpen that the Mets don't have anything of, right? It's Diaz and everybody and nobody else at the moment, right? We have no Ottavino, no May, no Lugo. So how's the Mets are gonna figure out this bullpen here? So there's a bare bullpen right now. Right now, there's no bridge to get to Diaz. Wasn't that the problem the last couple of weeks in September, where Diaz pitched 6 times in the entire month and had 2 saves? It's a problem, guys. And there's a lot of holes the Mets have to fill. And we'll see. Again, some people say give Beatty a chance, give Alvarez a chance. I'm on board with that. But let them win those jobs. Don't just give it to them. Don't give Alvarez the catching position just because McCann sucked last year. Don't do that, right? Play those guys in the spring. The best player, the best 2 catchers coming out of spring training, those 2 guys are your catchers going up north. The same thing with third base. Play Beatty and Escobar every day in spring training. Whoever wins the job, you give them the starting position. That's the way I see it, right? Let's see what the Mets do. I think big things are going to happen this week. At least a couple of signings. I think the ball's going to get moving a little bit. If you were checking Twitter, a couple of baseball execs believe, and I think Anthony DeComo said on Twitter that he has the feeling that things are going to happen this week during Thanksgiving and start rolling when it comes time to winter meetings. I expect Senga to sign this week, and look for Jacob. Jacob deGrom's market is basically non-existent. I know the Yankees checked in on him and a couple of other teams checked in on him. Listen, the Braves, the Yankees, and every other team other than the Rangers or the Mets are probably the only 2 teams that is the market for Jacob deGrom. Obviously, a lot of teams would love Jacob deGrom, but not at the number he's looking for, right? So, I think deGrom believed, or at least his agent made him believe, that there's going to be many teams going after him, or at least 4, 5, or 6, which would jack up the price a little bit. Just makes sense, right? But all of a sudden, from the Andy Martino, the Buster Olney tweet in the middle of the season that the Atlanta Braves are going to be aggressive against Jacob deGrom. And we all know he lives in Florida. The Braves are a dangerous team looking to get Jacob deGrom in the offseason. This was what Buster Olney said in the middle of last year, which Buster Olney forgot to say that the Braves never did this in their entire history in signing big time names with big prices to put in their rotation. They never do that. And why would they start? There's no reason to for them. They never did. So I don't think they would. They signed veterans like Charlie Morton. They signed their young pitchers in their starting rotation. That's what they do. So the Buster Only tweet was hilarious and a joke. And people believed it. And it made Braves fans believe it. And which was stupid. And then you hear Yankee fans talking about it, which is another hilarious thing. And then we wonder why Met fans get pissed off at other fan bases because they're delusional when it comes to certain things that makes no sense. If you're a fan of a team and you come out with nonsense like the Braves are going to be aggressive for Degrom, what gave you that idea? Because the drive from Atlanta to Florida is a lot closer than New York to Florida? Well, yeah, obviously. But you also have to cough up the money as too. Degrom is not going to take $35 million to go play with the Braves because it's closer to home. It makes no sense to me. And it still comes back to the fact it's the Rangers and the Mets when it comes to Degrom. And then recently, you heard Mike Puma, you heard a couple of, even Andy Martino come out and say, well, the Mets believe that if the contracts are similar for the Mets and whoever else, which is most likely the Rangers, Degrom would be willing to come back to the Mets if the contracts are close. Well, how did that change with over a couple of months? All of a sudden, he felt like New York is okay? No, because it was fool's gold to think that Jacob Degrom would just leave just because, like, it's not like Texas is a hell of a lot closer to Florida than New York. It's not that much of a difference flight-wise. Now, you could talk about DeGrom's political reasons, knowing that he kind of likes the slow pace and the openness of Texas. It's a little bit more low-key, not a lot of pressure. Yeah, I could agree with you with that. But if the Mets give him $45 million per year over 4 years, and the Rangers come a little bit short of that, why would he go to Texas? I don't know. But hey, at the end of the day, it comes down to money with everybody. The same thing with Trey Turner. Philly fans are already buying Trey Turner jerseys. A guy on my channel, on one of my videos, on the Senga video, said, "Oh, he's going to be a Padre," which all indications say, okay, yeah, he spoke to the Padres, but it doesn't seem like he's that serious with the Padres. And then you look at Jacob Degrom, where the Brave fans all over my channel were saying, "Hey, he's going to be a Brave." We'll see. We'll see. Aura, whatever happened to Matt Allen and that other Venezuelan pitcher we have in the minors? Well, the Venezuelan pitcher in the minors is a couple of years away at least, and Matt Allen hasn't been healthy in 3 years. And the Mets, over the last couple of years, have been trading any relative pitching prospect like JT Ginn, who they traded for Chris Bassett. And everybody wasn't mad about that trade because they just assume, oh, they're going to have to sign Chris Bassett. Well, that doesn't look too fun anymore, right? So Ginn could have possibly had a chance to be up in 2023 and definitely 2024. So Matt Allen, until he's healthy, now everybody says he has really good stuff, but if he's not healthy, then is he really a prospect anymore? Calvin Ziegler is another guy who was in the top 15 2 years ago and now hovered around the top 10 and now is in the top 10. He's the guy you have to look out for, but he's probably about 2 years away. So that's why the Mets have to spend money on their starting rotation, and they'll probably have to sign at least 2 free agents. If that's Degrom, Senga, is that Rodon, Senga, is that Rodon and Degrom? They have to sign at least 2 to fill up their rotation. We'll see who they're. Oh, and yes, I understand about state tax. But again, that's understandable. But also, Jacob Degrom actually wants to win as well, right? And again, if you do the tax breaks with the state income tax, that's true. I agree with you. But if the contracts are similar, this is what Puma said, and this is what multiple reporters said. If the contracts are similar, Degrom will be willing to stay with the Mets. So, how similar, right? If both teams give $200 million, obviously the state tax comes into play here because he would be getting more per year, obviously. But if the Mets give a couple of $1 million more per year, well, it's basically similar contracts after state tax. So I don't think DeGrom's going to go for an extra $10 million just to the Rangers or the Mets. I think it has to be somewhat in range where the fact that is it perfect to move to Texas with your family? Yes, no state tax, but a Rangers team that has to fight it out with the Mariners, the Astros, and the Angels have started to make good moves. So you got 3 teams in your division alone that you're already probably not better than. And DeGrom has to look, because it's, the Rangers need pitching. Well, didn't DeGrom have that problem with the Mets all those years where it was DeGrom and nobody else? So he's going to a similar situation in Texas that the Mets gave him for basically his whole career. But last year, DeGrom was on a winning team, right? He came back and was supposed to be that guy to push him over the top in the second half. Well, it didn't happen. So I don't know what DeGrom, like I said, nobody knows exactly what DeGrom wants. If DeGrom wants to leave New York, is he going to take $50 million less than what the Mets offer to leave New York? I can assure you he's not doing that. So it's a matter of what DeGrom wants, because the deals are probably going to be similar. It's just a matter of what he wants. And again, look, DeGrom doesn't like change, right? He even talked about that throughout his career. He doesn't like a lot of change. He doesn't like a lot of attention. Well, you don't think going to the Texas Rangers as the ace of the staff, the guy who is supposed to help them put them over the top in the AL West, is not going to bring pressure, right? Alex Rodriguez went there and signed and failed, right? Multiple players got big contracts in Simeon and Seager. What did they do? The Rangers were basically irrelevant. So even those 2 guys couldn't put Texas over the top. Is DeGrom just going to put them over the top and be better than the Mariners or be better than the Astros or be better than the Angels? I don't know if that's enough. What is DeGrom, a 5-game difference? Maybe. That wouldn't have got the Rangers in the playoffs. So DeGrom also has to look at that, right? I think he looks at it. The Mets have a better chance of going further than the Rangers do in their division and possibly further in the playoffs, right? DeGrom would be going to the West, where the Astros are the champions. The Mariners finally made the playoffs and look like they're an up-and-coming team. The Angels are already starting making moves with the Gio Urshela trade and a Tyler Anderson signing. Adi Moreno, before he sells the team, is going to go one more hurrah this year with Ohtani and possibly with a healthy Trout. Who knows what could happen with the Angels? They might be better. So that's what DeGrom will be walking into in the AL West. At least in the NL East, he'll have the Braves, obviously, is a threat. And we still don't know what the Phillies are, right? The Phillies had a 86-win season, got to the World Series, but what are they, right? We don't know because offseason's not over. We don't know what the rosters look like. We'll see. But could the Phillies get drastically better? Well, it still looks like they need a lot of bullpen help. I still think they need help in their rotation. And Harper could be out for half the year if he gets Tommy John surgery. So there's a lot to think about there. But nobody can tell me that DeGrom believes the Rangers have a better opportunity to go further in 2023 than the New York Mets. If he believes that, and he's the missing piece, quote unquote, I can tell you that the Mets were worse with DeGrom this year than without him, because their first half was better record-wise than DeGrom when DeGrom was there in the second half. So what does that tell you? Is it all about DeGrom? Or maybe the Mets might be better without Degrom. I know that sounds crazy, and I don't believe that, by the way, but just think of it. How much of a difference if the Mets, say DeGrom goes to Texas and Rodon and Senga is signed by the Mets? How much of a winning games won by the Mets is different with DeGrom and Rodon? Maybe it's a 2-game difference. Maybe it could be better. Rodon could pitch the whole year, right? The first half where DeGrom was not there, maybe the Mets would have had a couple of more wins, and the end of the season would have mattered in that Braves series because we got a couple of more wins in May, right? You know that argument that everybody was having with me in the early part of the season? Oh, the April games don't matter. What comes down to September? Well, the Mets would have never had to worry about September and play well if they won 1 or 2 more games in April or May. So it comes down to it. It comes down to the fact when DeGrom was out, the Mets played better. But that doesn't mean they could have won 1 or 2 more games in April, May, June, and July where DeGrom wasn't around. And could have mean a huge difference in September when everybody was falling over themselves that they had to win the division. And they got caught up in that whole fiasco. And I think it hurt them going into the playoffs. So with that said, guys, it's 6 o'clock. You know what that means? Live stream is going to end. Thank you guys for tuning in to MLB Free Agent Frenzy. Watch out for Senga and watch out for Degrom this week. I think there's going to be a lot of movement. I believe Senga is going to sign, and I think we're going to hear offers coming to Jacob Degrom from the Mets, the Rangers, and maybe a team in the distance. But I would not be surprised if Degrom signs in the next week or week and a half. Only because I don't think Degrom wants to wait around. He knows this market. There's not a lot of teams after him. So it's not going to be a fight fest back and forth. And I think Senga is going to sign before Thanksgiving. Degrom, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the end of the week. I wouldn't be surprised with that either. So with that said, guys, make sure you check out the Verlander the Mets video. I break it down a little bit more of what type of salary he's looking for, why the Mets should go after Verlander, and is Verlander a plan B if they lose out on DeGrom, or it's a plan A with DeGrom and with Verlander. I'll let you know. I'll let you know all about that in that video. So once again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a good night. I won't be doing a live stream tomorrow. Unless there's breaking news, I will go live. Other than that, I'll see you on Wednesday. Everybody have a good night. As always, Mets fans, let's go Mets. Have a good night, guys.